Thank you so much, Hari, for joining us today.
And thank you, Deepshikha, for having me.
And I think there is hardly anybody in the Indian and the regional ecosystem who doesn't know you, Hari, the author and the startup.
You're being very kind.
But Hari, can we start with a very brief introduction of yours?
Yes. So very briefly, Deepshikha, I manage human resources at BigBasket. I also do a bunch of other things, which is I'm associated very closely with India's startup ecosystem. So for instance, I straddle the entire early stage, very early seed stage to very mature and growth stage VCs. So I'm a mentor at Techstars, Silicon Road and Numa, where companies at pre-seed level are being incubated. I'm also an advisor at an early stage Series A VC fund. I'm also an advisor at Nandan Nilekani's Fundamentum, which is more of a growth stage fund. I'm also associated with India's education, ecosystem a little bit. So at all levels. At some places I teach, for example, Harappa Education. I'm a faculty. I teach problem solving. At Avantika University, I'm a member of the academic council, which is responsible for setting the curriculum for the students. And at Chandigarh University, I'm a member of the corporate advisory board, which is more of a strategic role. I'm also planning to take on a couple of board roles in public companies, and I'm a mentor to very early stage startups as well, individual to some companies, like it could be Unfound, for example, Instacar, Rocketium. These are startups where I'm a mentor, for instance.
Fantastic.
I also have written 3 or 4 books, the last one being Saying No to Jugaad, The Making of BigBasket, and the next one is likely to be published by Penguin very soon, which is From Pony to Unicorn.
Oh, wow. Wow. We'll do an entire exercise on that one separately. And underestimating Say No to Jugaad has been a massive success and a benchmark in itself. So, Hari, BigBasket as a company itself doing phenomenal job, and I think while everybody else is, or rather most of the world is struggling with manpower and how to execute and deliver, you've been an example. You've set an example. How have you done that?
So Deepshikha, I think I should be a little honest about this. It's not that we are such a great company and we've done a great job. It's just that we are lucky to be in the right place at the right time, for the simple reason that a lockdown forces customers to order stuff online, which makes it easy for us. So at least the demand side is taken care of. I think the problem has been with getting the right number of people to deliver these orders, to pick these orders. So demand has shot through the roof. It's almost 5x time. It's 5 times what we used to see before the lockdown started. And in fact, our systems began crashing, and we had to work with AWS for additional servers and jig the whole tech architecture a little bit to ensure that things are not as fragile as they were a few days after the lockdown. So on the supply side, we are facing some issues, which is people are reluctant to come. The roads are empty, so it's easier to deliver, but you need people to come to the warehouse to pick these orders, to deliver these orders. That's been a bit of a problem, because I think the parents are obviously concerned. Young workforce, they don't want their kids to be out, in public spaces. They believe that this is a very dangerous, situation, and it's best to stay at home. Everybody's advocating staying at home. The government is saying lockdown is important, but these essential services need to go on. I think this is a typical situation where, most people are safe, but some people need to go out and deliver essential services. It's like war. So the soldiers, are putting their lives at risk, and that's what, in some ways, they're trained for, and in some ways, they're motivated to do that as well. I think we are also in that situation. We are trying to ensure that people turn up for work, and they will turn up for work provided you do a couple of things. One is, of course, you need to ensure hygiene at the workplace, which is the basic hygiene is taken care of, and it is taken care of in a very high quality manner. The second is you need to, draw a sense of higher purpose, create that sense of higher purpose in them. And that's not very easy, but, one of the videos that I had just posted where, the delivery boy was returning in one of the locations, and the entire team was there cheering for him, and there was a patriotic song playing in the background. These are very small things, but extremely powerful. So it's important to, create nice stories out of these events to make them appear as heroes, to let the voice of the customer travel to them, do posters, a lot of social media activity around what these people are doing. I think that also encourages them, motivates them to be present. While the outbreak has been terrible, I think the nation is placing a lot of hope in us. In some ways, we become some kind of a lifeline to the nation that no government agency in the history of independent India ever was. So I think that's a great sense of opportunity as well. It's a heavy responsibility. So I think as senior, at the leadership level, we all certainly feel this. It's about how you communicate this to the frontline, teams. That's very important. So I think that's what we've been doing.
So, Hari, while you're making it sound very in the moment and easy to an extent that we're motivating, we're making them heroes, but it's not a one day's work. You probably you definitely would have had a culture which has been running in the organization that people today could stand up. So, how have you been doing that? How have you been creating an organization with so much accountability?
That's such a beautiful question, Deepshikha. I think the very fact that you're able to ask this says you have such a deep understanding of how organizations work. So it's not a one day's job at all. It's not that, if you don't have a culture like this, which is already built, once the lockdown hits, I think things will just get worse. So it's the culture that we've created. So BigBasket, in that book we've covered, Saying No to Jugaad, we've been a pretty much no frills company, very honest, very transparent. We've never done things because they're fashionable to do. We've always chosen to do the right things, irrespective of the consequences. We've chosen to do the right things, even if it meant taking a hit on profits. We've chosen to do the right thing as long as the customers would benefit from it, as long as employees would benefit from those actions. I think we built a culture of humility. We built a culture of serving internal customers, external customers. One of our values is maniacal focus on customers, transparency, humility. So you see humility in all the leaders across the company, which is that we've got people from amazing education backgrounds, but they work very seamlessly with people with less privileged education and less privileged backgrounds as equals. So I think that culture begins to benefit in times of a crisis where, everyone is working together. There are no caste barriers. I'm using caste in a non-technical way, which is that there are no barriers within the company as who is who or hierarchy or anything of that kind. So I think that, plays out in a time of crisis like this to our advantage.
So, Hari, now moving on to the, to looking at the other companies or other companies, fledgling companies who are in spirit. So, what are you advising? A lot of companies, the startups particularly, whether it is bootstrapped or early stage funded, they're going through nightmares. I know of founders having panic attacks and, what are they going to do?
So these are tough times. So let me just, go back to 2008, 2009. That was a credit crisis. I think there were three black swan events in this century. The first was 9/11. The next was 2007 to 2009, the credit crisis. And third is the coronavirus. I think the first and third were truly black swan in the sense that there was no way we could predict this. But the second one was something that, was, happening for a while. And there were people who said that there is a bubble building up and it could burst anytime. Raghuram Rajan was one of them. I used to work for Virtusa at that point of time. We took the company public on NASDAQ. That was a dream come true in many ways for me. August 2007, we listed. And we were beginning to learn how to run a public company, in a very, very rigorous manner before suddenly this thing happened. Lehman Brothers fell. And before we could even think, large clients were beginning to cancel contracts and revenues were coming off, costs were not coming off. So I think the same situation is what startups are seeing, which is in times like these, revenues begin to come off while your costs remain where they are. Let's assume for a moment that your revenues are 90 rupees a month and your costs are 100 rupees. So your burn rate is 10 rupees a month. And let's say you have a runway of 6 months, your cash reserves can take you for 6 months. Now let's assume that revenues come off by 50%. So your 90 goes to 45. So your burn goes up from 10 to 55, which means it's gone up nearly 6 times, which means a 6-month runway has just come down to 1 month. So you need to do some things very quickly. And I think each company is in a very different situation. They need to figure out what does it mean for us and what do we need to do. It can't be the same prescription for every company. So, for instance, this particular example, right? They need to take some quick actions to cut costs. And if you just look at what was happening in Italy, I'll just draw a parallel there, which is that they were running out of ventilators. They had more people in ICUs and needing ventilators than they had ventilators. So the call they took to start with was that first come, first serve. They thought that was the best call, most equitable call. But then they figured out that that wasn't really equitable, because imagine a 30-year-old mother with two children coming in a little after an 85-year-old man who has bad medical history with less chance of survival. Is it better to give it to that woman with two children? I think so. So I think they figured out and they had to make some of these hard choices. So I think you can start with in a very philosophical way, which is saying that, all of us will take a pay cut. But then very quickly you realize that that's not necessarily equitable. It may be equitable for some company. I'll come to that very quickly. But for some organizations of most, they will quickly realize that employees fall into four categories based on, their contributions, immediate contributions and immediate impact they're making, which is it could be high or low. And in terms of the kind of salary that they're drawing, are they overpaid, heavily paid, or are they underpaid, or are they paid rightly? So based on these two, parameters, you can have four choices. And the worst hit will always be those who are highly paid and those whose contributions are somewhat questionable. And especially when startups begin to grow and they grow rapidly and they get, huge funding, SoftBank begins to fund them. That's when they go and hire all kinds of people, high cost, questionable contribution. And these are individuals who are going to be hit or axe the moment a crisis like this comes. I think very quickly companies will have to do this, which is they have to make a list of these individuals. And it's important for the founders not to necessarily talk about this in the entire leadership team, because many of the people in the leadership team may be actually part of this group, which is highly paid, questionable contributions. So it's important for the founders to just discuss between themselves and just involve one or two other key people and then take these calls and quickly execute these calls. And you could be generous in your separation packages. You could be generous in the way you make an exit with these individuals. Because, once you can go beyond what is stated in the contract. If a contract says 1 month's notice period on separation, you could make it 2 months or 3 months if you think it'll be more amicable. Because, once you separate these individuals, then you cut out the fat in some ways. You become a lean organization and you can run for a much longer period of time. And investors, both existing as well as potentially new investors, respect such companies. They have a great deal of respect for companies and managements which can take these bold calls. So I think it really depends on every company's situation. So there are some companies who built their teams very thoughtfully, have not gone overboard in hiring. For them, maybe they will not find anybody in this category. For them, it may be a better decision to take a pay cut across the board, or it may be a good decision to take a pay cut based on slabs. The more senior, the bigger the pay cut. So that could be one way.
Okay. And how do you think this whole event panning out, Hari? I mean, how do you think the next, is it 2 months, is it 6 months, is it the entire year, 5 years, some people are saying?
Frankly, Deepshikha, this is something that I'm really not competent to answer for the simple reason this is a medical issue. And there are so many opinions out there. There are some people who say that, India, you will have 20 to 100 million people infected. There's some people who say it won't be more than 1 lakh or 2. It'll be exactly like what happened in China. So we really don't know how this is likely to unfold. But one thing is certain. I think this fear of, intense socialization, assembling in large groups, that fear will continue for a while. As a result of which, I think the sharing economy worldwide will take a big hit. And the sharing economy could be companies like Oyo, it could be taxi, aggregation companies, Didi in China, Ola, Uber. It could be co-working spaces. I think they would take a big hit because the sentiment would be very negative. I think sentiment drives companies, drives financials, drives investment decisions more than the reality. And the sentiment in these industries, I think, is taking a big hit. So it's very difficult to say how long it will last, but my own sense is that life won't be normal in 2020. It will not be normal in 2020. It will take beyond that.
Okay. And what about, so just a final question on, coming back to the how the professional world is now changing. What is your thought on work from home? Is that going to become a norm? Is it going to become, something that is more acceptable? Like, the video communication, is Zoom going to be the the mega win of coronavirus.
That's true. So I think there is greater acceptance of remote working. Many companies which had no choice had already been working remote. So for example, global companies like IBM, Accenture, which with distributed teams, you could have a team where some members are in New York, some members are in Bangalore, and some are sitting in Costa Rica. So this kind of video conferencing, conference calls was a way of life for them. And they had continuously been making improvements on how to make these more effective. But a lot of the other companies, especially companies which had a domestic footprint, purely domestic footprint, and startups, I think face-to-face working was seen as almost inevitable, that there was no other way. I think this outbreak has helped everyone realize that there is a way. There is a lot of work that can be performed reasonably effectively at home. For example, a good chunk of work that you do in office is in solitude. You respond to emails, providing people inputs, providing people outputs, which is in the form of a PowerPoint, Excel sheets, and you could sit at home and do that effectively. You're meeting 2 or 3 other people, a standing meeting, and taking some decisions. And you think that's the only way to do it. You can sit at home, call one person, conference 2 other individuals, and take those decisions. I think people don't even know how to do a simple conference call on the phone. And they believe that, it's worth spending 2 hours in traffic every day, going to one place, a common roof, and, meeting there. So I think there's a realization that a lot of work can be done at home. Something certainly can't be done. And you may need to have offsites for those. You may need to meet in the office for some of these. But my own belief also has been that good habits don't last very long unless those conditions that created those good habits continue. So bad habits are likely to come back quickly. So I think in 2021, when everything slowly limps back to normal, I think bad habits are likely to come back, I'm assuming.
Great. Thank you. You're sitting in Bangalore, I'm sitting in Delhi. I think
yes.
Work from home is a good habit for me.
Yes, yeah, great.
But thank you very much, Hari. Any other closing remarks that you would want to give for this conversation?
The only comment that I would have is something that I've been telling the teams at BigBasket as well, that we must be optimistic. We must exude optimism. We must give hope to people. I think if we don't exude optimism and provide hope, then the rest of the teams will lose hope. So I think that's an important role that we all need to play. We need to think very clearly. We need to take decisions very quickly. I think there has never been a time when it was more important to think clearly and act decisively. I think in good times, if you don't think clearly, if you don't act decisively, take time for your decisions, make mistakes in the way you think, I don't think it would have hurt you very badly. But now it would hurt you very badly. Startups would get hurt very badly. So I think it's very important to think in an unemotional, impersonal way, think very clearly and act very decisively.
Great. Thank you so much.